What's up and welcome to Rauta's opinion videos. Today I'm gonna little bit do pondering about thrash metal, why it got almost killed after early 90s and why it still hasn't managed to come back to its golden era like so many other genres actually have, or at least they're not dying or bleeding to death as thrash metal is. Now, many of you know thrash metal by the big four, that is Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth and Anthrax. All these bands are, of course, from United States of America and old enough to kinda define the whole genre as it is. For thrash metal, these names are pretty much the same thing as Black Sabbath is to whole metal, or at least traditional doom metal and all that stuff. There are also big names in other countries, obviously German being the number two in many respects, or to number one to some bands or people, but talking about bands like Destruction, Sodom and Creator are of course the names that for some people kind of defined not only German thrash but Euro thrash in general. Many countries like Brazil or even Finland helped to brought kind of a specific style to thrash, you know, the kind of vibes that never basically got copied as such, but well, helping to create and define the genre even more. Think of bands like Sepultura back in the days when they basically defined the whole Brazilian metal, even though there were lots and lots of other bands more underground maybe, but still making their name and the career and all that stuff. Now, it's only a big question to me and maybe to the rest of you guys as well, like, so what happened and what killed or almost killed thrash metal into extinction after the early 90s? In the 80s, thrash metal was doing just fine. Not only the big four, not the German trio, but many names, not only from United States, but many countries were actually very kind of lively back then. They were just good bands emerging from here and there, and releases were being made and great bands emerged from various places. For example, in Finland we had a lot of bands back like the late 80s, early 90s, which were later on put into a collection, or not recently, released by Smart Records, kind of like even 3 years span. There were like dozens of bands actually doing that kind of stuff. Stone maybe they being number one band from Finland and all that stuff. But they never made it as big, obviously, as the names I mentioned earlier. However, thrash was very energetic back in the 80s and even early 90s. And then it suddenly kind of went almost extinct. Well, obviously the underground has been always active and such, but the thing is, where did all the soon-to-be big names vanish? What happened to them? What got them beaten? My opinion is, and kind of a theory, which I'm not backed up with any kind of information like finding up Googling, but you know, just thinking and you know, what is my feeling that kind of got killed these great bands, well, at least promising names. It's obviously death metal and black metal. The very two kind of subgenres of metal music that were kind of like the, you know, smaller brothers, little brothers of metal music, and especially thrash metal. All these are, you know, kind of a different corners of what we usually coined, you know, for in terms of extreme metal, you know, extreme in many sense, you know, be it about lyrics, be it about topics, be it about, you know, the playing style, be it about, you know, production and all that stuff. So where thrash metal was kind of doing its social statements and, you know, dealing with topics such as war, suicide and all that stuff, and especially with bands like Metallica and Slayer and so forth, death metal went to kind of a more brutal ways. As we all know, you know, there were murders and there were serial killers and just, you know, torture, rapes and all that stuff. Very visceral stuff, but then again also so often just the outcome of imagination. You know, kind of a horror stories, if you will. Gore stuff maybe, but usually only limited to our own imagination. Be it like bands like Cannibal Corpse or many others, usually death metal meant more into the kind of horror thing versus the real world, which was so often the inspiration for thrash metal, be it true stories or just, you know, kind of opinions, you know, mirrored through the thrash metal lyrics. Now, black metal is a whole new story to that. They kind of decided to went to more grim and not so much horror things, but more of a kind of philosophical, anti-religious, and even kind of a occult ways. That is to kind of delve deeper into the human mind, not only because rebellion of Satan or you know, being the antichrist, even though that was already featured by, you know, thrash metal back in the day, but totally kind of like a different approach. And of course, all these three so-called extreme metal genres could just, you know, live and breathe together, you know, in line, without basically not stepping on toes. Whereas death metal never, you know, got away from, you know, this kind of a plain technical, being more brutal and all that stuff, black metal went the other way. It's kind of a, it could be said that black metal is the, it exists on its own rights, basically because, you know, borders were crossed, boundaries were broken, and, you know, kind of a new promises were given. I mean, whereas thrash metal was kind of like very laid back in a way, and, you know, so on the ground, but also very daily stuff. I mean, like, be it about like overpopulation or lack of food and water, kind of like this social justice warriorship back in the days in many ways. But, you know, black metal went to a different approach, and of course I can totally understand why people were suddenly not interested in about these lyrics. We were just like too daily stuff, too ordinary, too just like basic stuff. So black metal was obviously giving something else that were just kind of like a good excuse to just, you know, abandon thrash metal. I totally get it, been there, done that, and still doing. But what I don't get is that whereas often black metal is not nearly as skilled as thrash metal, suddenly all this musicianship and, you know, able to handle your instruments like excellent ways, you know, being superb at what you do, was suddenly just like, who gives a shit? Who cares? Doesn't even matter. Satan matters. And that is something that I don't totally agree with. Now, this being said, as a person who is not good with guitar, it's not like I'm here to do this kind of elitist speech that, you know, like, because I am good with drums or, you know, vocals or guitars or whatever, it's just like I can, you know, tell you that you're doing it wrong. This is not the point here. This is not to say that one of or any of these genres is better or lesser than the rest. I'm just, you know, pondering why suddenly it became like it doesn't matter. And don't get me wrong, I like very many bands like Ildiarn, for example, and other such bands which are so primitive, so kind of like a antithesis of, you know, being skilled musicians. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like punk with Satan in a way. I know some people totally shun away from these kind of comments and ideas and opinions, like saying like black metal and punk does not have anything to do with in common. For me, they have a lot to do with in common. Of course, they have their differences, but anyway. So while punk or black metal never was about, you know, being skilled at musician and, you know, making these kind of strong statements and comments about what world is going to, or why war and death and suicide and blah 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 are this and that, kind of is like beyond my understanding. Now, don't get me wrong. Once again, I totally understand why black metal or Satan or, you know, devil worshipping or occultism are so goddamn tempting. They offer something beyond the daily crap. So it's kind of a escapism in a way, you know, kind of like getting out of here, but also, delving deeper into the human mind, beyond life and death as such. I get it. And then again, like I said, death metal was going to a different direction. That was about brutality, deaths and murders and all that stuff, and horror scenes, in so many ways. Of course, there were bands all the time that were kind of like between, these genres, or the definitions of genres. Take example, death. Always kind of very skillful, and the riffs were kind of like flirting with thrash metal all the time. But at the same time, it kept its distance. And also the lyrics were not just, typical death and murder and violence and gore and blood type of lyrics, but once again, something that could have been seen and read on thrash metal as well. So what killed thrash metal? If you ask me, it wasn't commercial enough. Not enough sexiness in a way what death metal was offering. Because, like I said, death metal was more extreme. Suddenly, all the production were thicker, kind of a more brutal, more low-tuned guitars and all that stuff. Rolling vocals, never heard before. Thrash metal was then again just speeding up kind of heavy metal. It may be thrashier, heavier riffs, maybe more chugging stuff and all that stuff. Kind of like the idea that first you get rock and roll, then you get heavy metal, then you go to the next phase, be it thrash metal or death metal or whatever. But what I don't get is that even these bands, like big names I already mentioned, while they were getting more and more popular, what happened to the rest of the guys? What killed their enthusiasm? What killed and drove away those people and artists that had the skill to do that kind of music? Was it because the labels were not as much interested in? Was it because the rising, genres such as grunge or nu metal and all that stuff that got away? For example, Slayer, the band I'm wearing here right now, kind of got lost with Diabolitin Musica. So kind of like, let's do this kind of a new metalish thingy, crap or whatever. Same, in a sense, happened to Anthrax. They went with crossover and all that stuff, and they never kind of got back from that, even though nowadays they're kind of doing 80s stuff again. And, well, Metallica. Come on, after Black Album, who can actually say that these newer albums are that good? And let me tell you, it's more than a quarter of a century since those albums got out. It's almost like 30 years since Metallica made a killer album. So all kind of crazy stuff happened. Megadeth, never big fan of myself, but I guess they were the one that kind of kept his, business, be it thrash metal or whatever. Well, Slayer got back into the stuff, but still, no new Rain in Blood or Seasons in the Abyss from them either, as much as I love the newer albums. Well, Sodom did some good stuff. Same, I guess, could be said about Creator. Destruction, not so much. Even though, decent comeback and all that stuff. Sepultura, come on, it's a different band nowadays. And you could continue with the list all over again. Now, the one thing I don't understand is kind of the new generation of metalheads. They are people like, they're 18 years of old, already full of tattoos and all that stuff, pentagrams and goats and whatnot, and they're so goddamn 100% black metal since they are like, I don't know, 15 or whatever, and they kind of, I don't know if it's about despising thrash metal or it's just like being ignorant about it, but they never kind of got to, go through these phases, which then again meant a lot to so many black metal bands pioneering the whole genre. If you ask like basically any early 19th black metal band, ask them what kind of bands inspired them, it's basically guaranteed that it was thrash metal that inspired them. Same goes for death metal. You don't have to go farther than early Morbid Angel or other bands that kind of defining the whole death metal genre back in the late 80s or early 90s, and you can just hear the thrash metal there. It's not like it is hidden or just like we like that stuff but we don't want to play it. because they did. Early Cannibal Corpse, same thing. It's like thrash metal gone just a little bit heavier before they actually defined death metal as a kind of new genre instead of being these kind of what would be nowadays called thrash death hybrids. Now, of course, there are lots of bands which are just, balancing things out, doing kind of like black thrash. Think of bands like Our Noir, which we are, by the way, having an interview out later than this video or before. I'm not sure when it's gonna go out. And other bands which are basically just, kind of nodding to both directions. Just black metal, not just, thrash metal, but both. Of course, lots of thrash metal bands, which are just, they want to have the other hand to the death metal genre, and the other is going thrash metal. And then there are bands which are just, incorporating all the, the different ideas from the whole range. Just a little bit black, just a little bit thrash, a little bit death, and kind of that's fine. But usually, I think that those pure to the genre are better than these hybrids. That's just my opinion, but if you get my meaning, what I'm trying to say here is that the kind of a flirting exists between the genres, and people are clearly inspired. But it seems that this new generation don't even have any clue about it. It's just like they kind of forgot the whole magnificent genre, which is, I think, vital nowadays again, but not yet there, if there ever will be, as it was back in the 90s. So it's not, I'm not so much about nostalgia what I'm talking about here, but I am kind of like hoping that the new generation of thrash metal would actually, sweep over and show what real skillful, musicianship can really be, what the just absolute killer tracks would be. But it just seems that so many bands either don't have it, they don't have the kind of a, the right type of feeling, the actual, write about these kind, write these kind of songs, not lyrics, not the skill to play these instruments. And if they do, they just might, go overly progressive and do some experimental stuff, which is then again a whole different story and so often so very boring. And then there are like people like me, too lazy to learn the guitar to do properly, and I don't know if I would be the right person to do thrash metal anyway, so I don't know. But it still kind of makes me sad in a way that thrash metal, as much as I love it, new bands are not coming the way they used to do. But for death metal and black metal, I don't see that problem. There are plenty of black metal bands emerging like every goddamn day, and I'm not saying that most of them are good, it's not about that, but it is like so much easier genre to play, and it's so much easier to write some vague black metal lyrics and just call yourself evil or whatnot, and people, oh, and there's Satan mentioned, yeah, I kind of dig it, and those riffs are kind of like cool. But it could be just a copy-paste crap. Death metal, yeah, it demands usually more skill, but those lyrics are so often just like, oh, you read it like a stupid horror book and now you're making songs out of it. You watch some B-grade horror movie about, slasher type of stuff, and you're now writing lyrics about it. Much wow, whoa, yeah. So I'm kind of yearning for the time when thrash metal actually was kind of like a spearhead of extreme metal. Those lyrics had more meaning, they had more opinion, more value. And there are thousands of examples basically out there. Just read like early lyrics by Metallica, for example. There are lots of great ideas. Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets. All those individual songs on their albums, just great views and opinions and lyrics, which is not happening to anymore. It's like when these old dinosaur artists are about to quit or die, like Ronnie James Dio or Lemmy Kilmister and so forth. It is just like I get this feeling that when these dinosaurs finally die, be it Metallica, Slayer or whatever, because they are eventually calling it quits. I feel that we don't get that kind of lines of lyrics anymore. We don't get that kind of a musicianship brought together with those kind of people who have make these statements and strong opinions and are brave enough, to do that, instead of just, entertainment, for the masses, the stadium kind of bands. And like, how are you doing? How are you? I love you, old man. Blah blah blah. That's kind of like boring. It's like there's only like entertainment or this cult underground. Where is the kind of more like the middle ground, which used to be so goddamn cool? I mean, like Metallica and Slayer and all that. They have been inspiring so many death metal and black metal bands throughout the years. As of course, just many heavy metal bands. Think of Iron Maiden, not the thrash metal example, but you get the idea. Great lyrics, great melodies, great catchy riffs, totally hit songs and all that stuff. Already kind of in the dying phase in so many ways. They haven't made those killer albums what they did back in the 80s. But when they did those killer albums, they were just inspiring a huge generation of metal people all around, with smart lyrics, with catchy riffs and all that stuff. Thrash metal, I'm afraid, seems like a dying breed, even though they are good bands. Like, for example, I think Dr. Living Dead from Sweden, one of the great ones nowadays, or Harlot from Australia, really killer stuff. Those are not enough, and they are not the type of bands I think will ever make it huge. Yeah, sure, they might be, be an opening act from, even some bigger names. But it's not like they will become, these days, Slayers or Metallicas or Megadeths or Sodoms or whatever. It is just like, there are big death metal names and there are big black metal names. And black metal is kind of a ridiculous, even on some standards, being big. If you think about those Norwegian stuff where there's kind of like ministers, hanging out with, politicians, just really everyday stuff versus the thrash metal everyday stuff what I was talking about earlier. And that is happening with black metal. It's like, what is going on with here? It's just like kind of starts to annoy me really. So I'm kind of like hoping, save thrash metal, bring some good stuff, good bands, good lyrics, all that stuff. Don't give up just for the imagination stories in, death metal. Don't just, settle with some second grade black metal Satan worshipping meaningless way occult void stuff, because there is so much other things to do. Goddamn people, we need more good bands that used to show to other bands or genres how things are done. And that, unfortunately, like I said, it's a dying breed. Well, I guess I got covered already everything I wanted to say. I guess I just, went over the boundaries of time and whatnot, because I was aiming for a few minutes and now it's 20 something. So once again, way too lengthy opinion video, but at least I hope some of you viewed this to the very end and got some thinking to do. Why thrash metal is dead and what could be done. I don't know, but see you soon with another video, and thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so far, and see you soon with more metal stuff coming your way.